I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story.
My guest this week is Mark Kilens.
So, right, an event can help you in the short term, but if you do a lot of events, right, you just keep building that audience and you just keep engaging them. But a piece of content, like we've always kind of heard in the past, is like evergreen. It lasts for a long time. It, over time, keeps building and building and building this audience.
As Chief Marketing Officer of virtual and hybrid events platform Airmeet, Mark Kilens leads a global team of marketing professionals who are working to advance the event-led growth movement across the B2B events category. Kilens has 15 years of marketing leadership experience. His main goal is to help global businesses engage and grow their customer base through event-led growth practices. This consists of using immersive and integrated events across the entire customer journey to create a highly personalized digital experience. Prior to joining Airmeet, he served as VP of Content and Community at Drift and oversaw Drift Insider, a community of 50,000 plus members. He also previously held the title of VP of Marketing at HubSpot and went on to build HubSpot Academy from the ground up.
My interview with Mark Kilens is coming right up. But first,
hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
as a business-to-business marketer, your needs are unique. B2B buying cycles are long and your customers face incredibly complex decisions. Isn't it time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you? LinkedIn ads empower marketers with solutions for you and your customers. LinkedIn ads allow you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful manner. On LinkedIn, you'll have access to and build relationships with decision makers. Of the 875 million users on the network, 180 million are senior level executives, 10 million are C-level executives. You'll also be able to drive results with targeting and measurement tools built specifically for B2B. And they work. Audiences exposed to brand messages on LinkedIn are 6 times more likely to convert. LinkedIn ads is also ranked number 1 for security, community, and ad experience as part of Business Insider's Digital Trust Study. Make B2B marketing everything it can be and get a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. Mark Kilens, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you, Nick. That is quite the intro. I appreciate it.
We specialize in bios over here on the On Brand podcast, and then it goes downhill from there. But you nail that bio, and you've got enough of the listeners to keep trucking forward. So I'm fascinated as you talk about the event-led growth movement. Talk about what that means and what's ultimately been a crazy couple of years in the event space.
Yeah, no, happy to, Nick. So I'll give some backstory. I started doing marketing back in 2008, really 2009 at the first company I joined out of college. It was this bootstrapped, scrappy company. I stumbled across inbound marketing and HubSpot at the time. And, if you know inbound marketing, it's really about content marketing. At least when it was initially created, it was all about creating content that's going to pull people into your website, don't interrupt them, right. Exchange some content for their information, and continue to nurture the relationship that way. So my background is in this content-led motion, if you will, very, very content-focused. And then as I joined HubSpot after that job, and then I joined Drift after being at HubSpot for 8.5 years, I was still doing a lot with content, don't get me wrong. And I started to do a little bit more with product-led motion, that kind of go-to-market strategy. And then I also started to do a lot more with events. And at Drift, I started to realize that events, which I also, by the way, Nick, include webinars in my definition of events. So first off, I would ask everyone to think about changing how they might define an event. It's not just like an online not online, but like an in-person conference or one of these online virtual events. It's all of these different ways you can get people to join together to ultimately achieve something together. Learn something, share something, meet a group of people. So that experience at Drift showed me how powerful events could be, because we did a lot of events in person. Then we shifted to virtual, and then when I was leaving, we were doing both in person and virtual. And what I found was events, including webinars and all these other small things we did and big things we did when it came to getting people together, generated over 50% of the business's pipeline every quarter. So I'm like, it was events plus content that really was driving Drift's growth. And I was like, man, we could teach more people about this and talk more about this. And then the pandemic happened, and that's when the event mix became less about in-person. The old way was just doing in-person events and kind of unengaging webinars. Now the new way, because of the rise of remote work, remote selling, and I really think of it as hybrid selling and hybrid working, you now need to connect with people in different ways. And that's where I think having an event strategy as part of your go-to-market, along with content and product and community or whatever else you want to use, sales-led, is so, so important.
Well, and I love that I love definitions, big fan of them here, and making sure that we are using these words and labels in our space correctly. So I love what you said about expanding our definition of what we're talking about with events. But I think that last point that you made is critical too, because as you look at studies of high performing content, events are in there. And yet I feel like when we talk about content marketing, events don't necessarily get the space in the mix that they deserve. We're so quick to think of some of these other more popular digital platforms and forms of content like podcasting, which we're sitting on one right now. But we don't often include events, and we should. And it makes me think, if we break down what events are, how do they exist in the content ecosystem? Because it really is about building a very close personal connection and community with your audience.
It's a very good point. Good question. Let's unpack it a bit. So I see, both content and events acting as like a center of gravity. I do think events act as a bigger center of gravity for when it comes to getting your marketing team more efficient and more aligned. And I'll unpack that and give you some examples. So first, you have to understand that you could start with a great thought leadership piece of content and then do events about it. So there's a company, many companies do this. I'll give an example of something recently that happened. There's a B2B business called GTM Partners, gtmpartners.com. It's a newer company. So there's startups and really large companies that do this. I can give a Salesforce example as well, that create this really big like thought leadership piece of content that I call like cornerstone content. And they publish that. And then after they publish that, they use that in a series of both online and in-person events. So with this GTM Partners example, they then did 3 in-person events in Seattle, San Francisco, and Boston. I attended the Boston one, where they took actually some of the actual content from that big digital book and research report and put it into a workbook, used it as part of the agenda for the half-day event. And then after that, Nick, they then are doing smaller, more intimate online events to go deeper into the subject matter expertise. And from like a brand building and a value add situation for attendees and for them, like creating actual pipeline and customers from this way, this kind of approach has been super, super successful. And it started with content and then went into events. I'll pause here before you have before I share the second way to see if you have any questions about that. Because the second way is event first, then content.
Well, yeah, it was probably my biggest question is contrasting between the two. But model one makes sense. So what's the other way look like?
Sure. So the second way, which is probably, I think a lot of people do it. So I have examples, of course, but it's maybe not as well. It's not done as much or as maybe as well as it could be, which is starting with the event. I think this has started to pick up traction though because of the pandemic, where you, of course, plan really well for any type of event you do. At least you should. You really focus on the audience, the goals that the audience is trying to get from the event, your goals, how you design that agenda that run a show, the experience you want to create. Getting really detailed into all those factors. But what you also do as you plan that event is you think about, well, how could I use this event across different marketing or brand assets after the event? So in this case, I'll give you an example that we did at Drift. I'm happy to give you another one if you want, but we actually did an online event. I guess you could say we were kind of innovative in this approach. We did an online event that involved 10 or 12 of our B2B partners that had, solutions that our customers either are using or would like to use or should be using. And we did this event literally, I think it was 3 weeks before lockdowns, Nick. And it was like a 4-hour summit. It was called A New Funnel for a New Decade. And we planned out the event with the intention of building an ebook from it and building an online course from it. And that's exactly what we did. So we were very methodical with like who is going to speak, what are they going to speak about, how would those sessions and those topics fit into then the outline of the book and the course, and how would we use those across a campaign over the next 6 months to attract people, not just to the event's recordings and like the clips we created from the event, but then these other bigger content assets, because not everyone's going to watch the recording. Not everyone's going to find the recordings. Not everyone's going to, engage in that way. Some people will want the content, will want to go even deeper and show more intention around taking an actual course. So we were very methodical in that approach, and it worked out very, very well.
Well, that's fascinating to think about too, and the kind of shift in the dynamics. And is there? I mean, is it universally accepted that event first would be the best option, or are there situations when you might? How do you know? It's like it's a very specific brand building chicken and egg question here.
It's a good question. The simple answer. And now we're kind of like deviating back into like how I think about, how businesses could go to market. One of the most important ways that business can go to market these days and build a brand, it's not just about how you go to market to generate revenue, but how you actually build a durable brand, is through a partner-led motion, partner-first motion. So with both those examples, well, I guess maybe, no, that's true. With both those examples, so the go-to-market partners example, and then the Drift example I gave, those two examples included other organizations and people in the creation of the content and then the events. So the question you really have to ask yourself first is, what are the goals that you're trying to achieve, both in the short term and long term? So what I mean by that is, I think an event is more of a great way to build an audience in the short term, because it's a defined time and place, either in person or online. There's a live audience, and you're literally trying to organize that time and place where people come together and join and engage and meet and interact and react to what's going on, because of that gathering. A piece of content, and I think a podcast is to me is a podcast show, at least, is a cornerstone piece of content as well. That's more about long-term audience building. and attention building. So, right, an event can help you in the short term. But if you do a lot of events, right, you just keep building that audience and you just keep engaging them. But a piece of content, like we've always kind of heard in the past, is like evergreen. It lasts for a long time. It over time keeps building and building and building this audience. So if I go to another example and say, hey, look, I think a lot of people, and maybe including yourself, you could think about this. If you had a podcast or have a podcast and you do that podcast live from a point of view of like, I'm going to record this live with an audience, and then I'm going to, and that's an event, by the way, right? Because you have a live audience, and you can find a time to engage them either before or after the podcast, heck, even during it, and you can edit it out. But then I'm gonna take that recording and turn that and syndicate it into a podcast episode across these different channels and shows. That's then the long-term attention building. So the simple answer, and it's a kind of a cop-out, but the simple answer is you got to do both. It's kind of just like, which way do you want to approach it based off your goals?
On Brand will be right back after this.
Hey there, it's Jason Falls. If your company or maybe one of your clients sells to marketers, you look for advertising channels that guarantee business marketers are paying attention, right? Let me introduce you to the Marketing Podcast Network. You're listening to it right now. It's a network of podcasts all about marketing. So 100% of MPN's audience are marketers. Reach them by advertising on the Marketing Podcast Network. Learn more and find our media kit at marketingpodcasts.net. Hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
Now, back to the show. So you were talking about, podcasting in the event space. And I think, as we've looked at podcast listenership skyrocket, that is a worthy asterisk there to add on to it, that many of the biggest podcasts profit from live events tied to that. But I think there's things that marketers can do, as you alluded to, that can help add an event overlay onto their current podcasting strategy that can amplify what they're able to do and who they're able to reach as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, we did podcasting. So here's another example at Drift and HubSpot. We did this as well. We're at an event. This was an in-person event. We would have a podcasting booth, and we recorded tons of podcasts. And some of this, we did live as a session. Some of it was more intimate, where like you could watch people in the booth, but it really wasn't in front of an audience of more than like, say, a few people. And all those people that are at the show, at the event, either speakers or guests that we went on the show, we would record 8 to 10. I mean, in some of HubSpot's events, they would record dozens of people and then use that throughout their, podcast show or podcast shows for the many months after the event. So I think there's a lot of things you can do with podcasts, both at live events and online events, that has kind of yet to be really fully tried out or realized. And that goes back to the comment around the center of gravity. The event acts as a center of gravity of attention, of great people, of great content. And now it's just being more thoughtful and more and just planning better about how you can take advantage, leverage, if you will. Like, I think that's the keyword, leverage that event for the rest of your marketing, brand building, demand gen, whatever it might be.
That is such a great point. And speaking of fully realizing things, talk a bit about Airmeet and how it helps marketers connect some of these dots further.
Well, I don't want to talk too much about the software. I mean, the simple way to think about it is we believe that the attendee at any event you do, no matter if it's a small 30-minute online event or a multi-day event, where we're helping do ticket registration, getting people to sign into sessions, the mobile app we provide to the attendees. No matter what type of event you do, it's all about how do you create and how do we partner with businesses to help them put their attendees at the center of experience, where the attendee, you hear things like put the customer first. We think of it as put the attendee first. So the attendee is leaving, during the event, but also then leaving the event with, a really strong feeling of some type of affinity or some type of, you could say, appreciation for the brand, because of that experience they just, they just partook in. So the way we designed our software, we have 4 different products that make up the Event Experience Cloud, is all with that philosophy and mindset. So that means we allow people to create elegant, engaging, exciting events of all these different use cases and types through a really easy to use interface. And of course, we know events are in many ways have to be customized. So we have a really easy way to help you customize the event, either using people on our team or the partner network we have. So we're really trying to be kind of like a complete solution, if you will, for people who want to embrace this more event-led emotion. And then we're also trying to educate people on and eventually, do more with this content approach, because the event plus content thing together is kind of like that classic 1 + 1 = 3 type of metaphor.
Right. And especially as you talk about the experience, and I love that you mentioned the emotion tied to it. But from the user's perspective, a lot of times some of the other things that are intended to do that are a bunch of clumsy systems that don't fit together as well as they should. So it really feels like it's some white space in the market where events can provide incredible impact, but as marketers, we don't always have the right set of tools for the right event for attendees to have that emotional experience that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I do think if you had to do one thing, this goes for both events and content, spend more time planning the event or content. So I think of it as like planning, producing, and promotion. Or promoting, right? So planning, producing, promoting. We spend probably a lot of time producing and then maybe not even enough time promoting, but how much time do you spend planning? It's almost, you almost want to spend as much, if not more time planning to make the producing that much easier and spend less time on that. You want to spend as much time. And then, yeah, definitely spend time promoting, but that goes back to how well you planned. So
and say more about that too, because I feel like, planning. We're having, it's a meetup, it's a conference, it's a webinar, done, and we put the label on it. But I think you're implying, rightfully so, that there's some other questions we need to answer in our planning work. What do those look like?
yeah, I mean, depends on what type of business you're at, like B2B versus B2C. But I mean, the fundamentals all hold true. I think of it as who, why, what, how, and then probably where. I just love using that framework because it's such, and then of course like when. But like that is like just answer those questions for anything and answer them in great detail though for the most part. So when I say who, it's like the audience. If you don't start with the audience, I fundamentally think you're doing it wrong. Like every marketer first should start with who am I trying to reach, engage with this thing that I'm planning. And you might have to get really specific with that. Sometimes it's very broad. Sometimes it's like very specific. A lot of the times it's in between. Then it's like, why would they care? And then why am I trying to reach or engage them? Like, and that can get, again, really detailed or not. Then it's about like, well, what are you doing or what are you using, I should say, using a piece of content, an event, to actually achieve the goals and reach the audience. And then it gets down into like, how are you going to do it? So from an event standpoint, like that's the run a show. That's like, look, I know what topic we're going to be talking about. I know, what type of event it's going to be at a high level. It's going to be a debate style online event. How do I want to manage that 60-minute debate style online event to maximize the why and really make sure the who leaves with that amazing feeling, that return on emotion, return on event, if you will, right? And then it's like, well, where does it take place? This is, online, of course, I said, and like, where do you promote it? Right? There's that. And then when, that's just the time, the place, and, all that stuff. Right. So that's a really quick example of like a really high level plan. But like, you can see that like, if you took the time to really do a brief and to build a brief with that type of intentionality, you then could say, well, I'm going to build this with the same intentionality for how I could reuse the event, that debate style hour-long thing, after the fact. What clips will I make? Where will I promote this? What content should come from this? Could I turn this into an episodic series? Could I do this with a partner? Could they promote it? Like, just making your life easier by doing more with one thing is really what marketers should be thinking more about these days.
Amen. And well said, too. And by answering some simple questions, we can have a solid event foundation. Well, a well-run event is something that makes many people smile, but now it is the time, Mark, for me to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Yeah, it's a good fun question to ask. I mean, it's tough. I like a lot of brands. I mean, I actually have right now the shirt I'm wearing. It's a long sleeve like t-shirt type thing. It's Patagonia. I love being outside. I grew up in New Hampshire. Very active, and I just feel like just the whole like ethos of the brands and their products, and I get the actual physical. It's a half magazine, half catalog, in the mail.
Right.
It's every like 3 months or 2 months. Like I don't know. I just love the brand. I just love Patagonia. That's one of my favorite ones. And it's like, because they just have done such a good job of, maintaining yet evolving who they are. And like they picked a side, right? Like I think the best brands, you got to pick a side. Yeah. You can't just be in the middle. So that one, I really love Patagonia.
That is a great example and a great reason too on picking a side. Mark, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
I mean, just Google my name. I have a pretty unique last name. There's not too many people with the last name Kilens online or in the world. There's definitely more cropping up, which is cool. I probably need to do some investigation who these people are, But yeah, if you just Google Mark Kilens, I mean, you'll find my LinkedIn. You'll find a lot of my other podcasts I've been on, YouTube. You might know me from HubSpot Academy. And then, yeah, I mean, just connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Those are the two biggest places I'm engaging with on a regular basis.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to that. We will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Mark, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you, Nick. It was a fun time. Thanks again.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.